This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Any of y'all that have listened to Body Bags for any time at all, you know that I love babies. I truly do. I love holding babies. I love taking care of babies. I miss those days when my kids were tiny. I miss those days when my grandbabies were tiny. There's nothing quite like it because you know that there in your arms, swaddled, you've got this fragile little gift. Today on Body Bags, Dave, Mack, and I are going to dig into a case that has just suddenly burst on the radar for us, particularly as of today, that is so dark and is so very evil that I don't know if I have the words to describe the horror that is involved. But I can tell you this, and I know this down in my heart. Science, as in all matters of death investigation, is going to point the way to the truth. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, when you reached out to me today, I got to tell you, I had a vision in my mind of a fork in the road where I'm thinking, do I want to go down this path? Because looking down it, I see all kinds of sinister elements here that are so very troubling that words kind of fail me here. But we're going to make it through this, and we're going to take a look at this case because people need to know.
You mentioned fork in the road.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned fork in the road, and it reminded me of Yogi Berra.
Yeah.
Baseball player.
Oh, yeah.
One of his sayings was, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Now, the truth of it is that to get to Yogi Berra's house, there truly was a fork in the road. And either way you went, it became the driveway for his house. So something that sounds weird was perfectly sensible to him.
Yes.
In this story, we're going to talk to you about Rebecca K. Park. She's 22 years old, and she is 38 weeks pregnant. The last time she is seen is on November 3rd, leaving her mother's house. Now, there's a very interesting part of the story that you have to know right off the bat. Rebecca Park was not raised by her biological mother, Cortney Bartholomew. Whether Cortney Bartholomew's children were taken from her or whether they were given up for adoption, we're not clear on that. We just know that Rebecca and her sibling, maybe plural, were adopted out and raised by an adoptive family. And here we are now. She's 22 and 38 weeks pregnant, and her mother's back in the scene. We know very little of their interaction, but it is not uncommon for children that are adopted to find their way back to a biological parent. Oftentimes it's the biological parent who tries to reach back and establish contact. They feel bad about what they've done in their life. They may, for whatever reason, I'm not putting words into anybody's mouth, because while that might be your situation, it is not this situation. So when she goes missing,
Yeah. And we've all got questions, right? I mean, we all have questions, and I'm kind of fleeing to the defense here of people that have been adopted out, because you have questions about who you are, from whence you came. We talk a lot about genetics on this program. There's no need here for, for forensic genetic genealogy in this case. The information that we have forensically to this point, boy, when I say dark, it paints such a dark picture from what we know at this point. Now, we've heard there's been information in the wind that's kind of floated about for about the past week. But I got to tell you, you pinged me today, and boy, do we have more information now. And that's why we need to move forward with this.
When this story first happened a couple of weeks ago, I remember you were on, I don't know if it was Court TV or what channel, I don't know what network called you, but there's this missing woman, a 22-year-old woman who is 38 weeks pregnant, and she's missing. We've got to find her. And it's crazy to think of somebody at that. I mentioned this. My daughter Hannah was born at 37 weeks gestation, born a little bit early.
Yeah.
So she's at 38 weeks. This baby can come any minute, and she's missing. What kind of condition, what physically can a woman at that stage of pregnancy deal with if they're out in the woods?
Particularly, and let's back up a second. This is taking place in Michigan. Okay, right. So we've got a young woman who is out there. And let's face it, Dave, a 38-week pregnancy or gestational age, let's say that, a woman that is that far down the line with a pregnancy, they're the most vulnerable among us all, right? I mean, because they're living for two at this point in time. You have to wonder what kind of care is she receiving, because she kind of vanishes off the radar. And I think that's one of the things that's very chilling about this. But she's got kind of, even though it's very distorted and muddled, she does have a group of people that are in her world, including a biological sister. Now, you had mentioned that she had been adopted out, but the biological sister had also been adopted out as well. And I'm curious as to, and we don't have an answer to this, but I'm just kind of throwing this out there. How did they both go to the same family and they were both raised? What was the impetus behind them perhaps making contact with their actual biological mother? I think that's an interesting dynamic here. But the sister in this case, the biological sister, does play a role in Rebecca's case, Dave.
Well, when the case was rolling out, Joe, and there were searches, volunteers, and many times when people have been out searching, and we've done so many crime-related shows where searches were being done, and I've always wondered how prepared people are to take part in a search, because it's not just going out to help look for somebody. At a certain stage, you're not looking for a living being. You're looking for the body of somebody. Yeah. And I wonder how prepared people really are, because there's no preparation, Joe.
No, there's not. And there's some parallels here between, it's often been said that that labor and delivery in a hospital is literally the most joyful place in the world. When you walk down the hallway in a labor delivery ward and you can actually see those babies, you hear laughter and happiness with the birth of a new life. But brother, let me tell you something. When things go dark on a labor and delivery ward, it gets really dark really quick. And what I mean by that is that when you have a child that dies, when you have a mother that has severe complications, brother, it didn't get much darker than that. And, with Rebecca, we have a young woman who is this far along in her pregnancy. Dude, she's not surrounded by anybody that can provide any kind of substantive care for her at all. All we know is that she's missing, and she's out there all alone in Michigan in November, and she's at full term. And again, that makes the most resilient among us kind of shaking our boots a little bit. And back to the idea that when you're on a search team and you're looking for somebody, just like on the OBGYN ward, you're thinking you have hope, right? Searchers have hope too. They're not going out, Dave, to find a deceased person. There is that kernel of hope that is within them, where they're hoping that they're going to find her safe and protected, that there is going to be a celebration, if you will, that they have found her, secured her. And Dave, that's just not the case here, brother.
You know, I'm so glad you pointed that out, because there was a show on, it's on Netflix right now, and it's out of South Carolina. It's Missing. Anyway, they were doing an episode of a missing child, and they sucked me in early, and based on how the mother was acting and just the scene and everything, I'm like, oh, this kid's gone, you know, and they're searching in the woods, and it's like, they found this child. Okay. He's a toddler, and they did find him out in the woods after a number of hours. I mean, and it was a great feeling. I'm not kidding as I was watching that, because I didn't think they were going to find an actual child, because we don't get those stories very often. No. And in this particular case, there was hope at first that they would find her. But you know what, Joe, you mentioned it's cold. She's last seen at her mother's house getting into a car, a dark colored car. And there was enough bad about this that was the tone. She's last seen getting into a dark colored car on November 3rd at her mother's. And I have to go back to this, because when they first reported her mother, I just assumed that, like most people, at her mother's house, the mother that raised her, you know, but that's not the case. No. This mother that reported that she was last seen with is actually a woman named Cortney Bartholomew. Cortney Bartholomew did not raise Rebecca or her sister. And we don't know when she came back into their life, but she was the biological mother, but did not raise them. They were raised by adoptive parents. I want to point that out, because what's coming up next is, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this search party that had been formed, and they were feverishly looking for Rebecca, they did find her. And unfortunately, when they found her in this dark forested area on that dirty forest floor, the circumstances, it's not like she's found, how can I say this, intact. She's found 3 weeks downrange from the point in time when she was last seen, in a state that we can only think is in decay. And the baby that we're so hopeful for is not there. Is not there. All we have are the remains of Rebecca laying on the ground. Her body, by all accounts at this point, has been greatly traumatized. And the story that her body reveals is the stuff of nightmares. Brother Dave, the story is so muddled here because there's so many actors, you know, the Shakespearean comment about, you know, the world is a stage, you know, and you've got these actors that come back and forth. Boy, there's quite a cast here, I have to say. And I think that this all begins with this biological sister who, remind me, didn't you say that, or isn't it out there that the sister, Rebecca, is like 22 and the sister's 21?
21. Yeah, they're very close in age. They were both adopted by, their biological mother is Cortney Bartholomew, who's 40 years old now. Cortney Bartholomew did not raise her girls. An adoptive parent took them and raised them. And now it is Cortney Bartholomew, that's who is last seen with Rebecca. Her sister Kim is 21. Now, I did want to add one quick thing.
Yeah.
On this day, November 3rd, Rebecca had inherited $2,000. So she had $2,000 in cash with her. And I'm wondering what that may have come into play, because she's got $2,000. Last person that sees her is the biological mother who did not raise her. And she goes missing. The day she is found on November 25th by volunteers. Volunteers found the body of Rebecca K. Park in the woods while they were looking for her. But that day, you and I were on the phone because on November 25th, police arrested her fiance and her sister. Now, Rebecca's fiance is a 47-year-old drug dealer. His name is Richard.
What's his age again?
43. Yeah.
He's 43 and she's 22.
Right.
Okay.
And to be very, very specific here, Richard Falor at 43 is older than Rebecca's biological mother, who's only 40. Okay. Now, Kimberly Park, 21, the little sister of Rebecca. Again, Rebecca, 38 weeks pregnant, gone for 3 weeks. Her body is found in the woods and there's no baby. And her fiance, her 43-year-old fiance, Richard Falor, is arrested. And her 21-year-old little sister, Kimberly, is arrested. Now, this is the interesting part, Joe. I remember I was on the phone with you on November 25th when this happened. And I said, hey, what do you think? Because were they having a relationship? What was going on? Try to figure this out. No, they arrest Richard Falor. He's a drug dealer. He was arraigned on 2 counts of delivering methamphetamine. He's got $1 million bond. That's not a little. Yeah. Kimberly Park, the victim's sister. Rebecca is 22 and dead. We don't know what happened to her baby. And Kimberly is charged with this, Joe. Tampering with evidence.
Okay.
Lying to a police officer. And filing a false report.
Yikes. Oh, my Lord. Okay, so it's at that point, because you and I have discussed this before, and I'll beat this drum until the day I close my eyes in eternal sleep. You're more at risk with the intimates in your life than you are with total strangers, okay? And I think that anybody is potentially capable of anything. I find it interesting also that you put this element in here of the $2,000 that she suddenly come into at this point in time. And you're talking about a man who has gotten her pregnant. He's a drug dealer. I don't know if he is a drug user. I would say if I were a betting man, that might be the case. Money can really tempt people and drive people to do incredible things. I'm not saying that he's necessarily involved. You had said that he's not charged in her disappearance at all. But go back to this baby sister. She's charged with filing a false police report.
Right.
Lying to the police.
Right.
I gotta tell you, certain things are not adding up here, but I can tell you this, going back to Rebecca, when they found her in this wooded area, we had gotten information about this case. We've kind of held off on talking about it, but I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag at this moment. There had been information that was floating about that not only was the baby missing when she was found, but Dave, there's some indication that when she is initially observed, she sustained some kind of significant abdominal trauma, and it has to be significant. And let me tell you why. Because downrange, we talk a lot about postmortem interval here, and we've talked a lot about decomposition. I think that we even did an entire episode devoted to decomposition on body bags, and we probably will revisit that again. If you're able at a scene to delineate between decomposition of a body that's been down for 3 weeks now, maybe, if we're using that date of November 3rd, if you're able to delineate between decompositional artifact and trauma, the trauma must be unimaginable. I can only imagine. My heart goes out to these people that, again, I go back to that word of hope. They're holding out hope that they can actually save her in some way, return her to safety. That's not the case here. What they witnessed, and I cannot even begin to fathom how these, the search party, and particularly the person that put their eyes on her first, they're going to be able to process this. This is something that will haunt them the rest of their lives because, pregnant women, you think about how vulnerable they are. You're hoping that you can find them. And that's just not the case here. What they found was a woman that had apparently been severely traumatized, and she's been left and discarded out in these woods like garbage.
For 3 weeks, Joe. Now, what's her body going to be like? In 3 weeks' time, the areas that were injured, being stabbed, cut, whatever, aren't those areas going to decompose in that area quicker than other parts of her body?
Holy smokes, you've been listening to what I've been preaching now for all this time. I feel, okay, this is it. My work here is done.
You made your mark.
Let's revisit this just for a second. Anytime a body is traumatized in any way, let's say it's a cut or even a gunshot wound, and I'd say a bludgeoning as well, particularly where the tissue is open and it accelerates this process of decomposition. So over a 3-week period, and I don't know environmentally what the temps have been in Michigan at this point. I know that I have friends that live in Michigan, and I love going to Michigan, particularly, up around Traverse City and all of this. I know that they get snows in Michigan. They always measure when they receive their first snowfall by Halloween. I've had friends that are up there that said that they've trick-or-treated in snow before when they were kids, which for us down here in the South is something that's so odd. But yeah, it's going to be, you have to balance that against, environmental temperatures. We know that heat speeds things up, but if a body is traumatized already, Dave, and is left out, is subjected to the environment, it will rapidly accelerate. It's going to accelerate the process of decomposition, particularly when you're talking about any kind of abdominal injury. Okay. You've already got little nasties that are existing, within our bowel. If that area, that space has been compromised at all, it'll even further exacerbate the process of decomposition. So I think that the takeaway here is that they would have had to have controlled that scene very carefully, because if she were to have been killed in that location, you're not just looking at decompositional artifact with things like we talk about decompositional fluids and all those sorts of things. Dave, if she was killed in that spot, and I have to assume that she was, you're going to have blood deposition surrounding that area. So if you think about fallen leaves on a forest floor, did you know that we can actually pick up on blood droplets on leaves? But you have to be very, very careful. You have to control that space. Once you find the body, it's like, thank you for your assistance. Everybody back out. At this point in time, we're throwing up a barricade of something, the yellow tape, and only certain people are allowed in. This case in particular out there in that location would take such a protracted period of time to process, because you're dealing with a lot of unknowns here. What we do know is that we've got a woman that has previously been identified as having been pregnant. You have to take that into consideration. And you don't know the path that she came in on, or that those that brought her to that location. We don't know what path they used to approach the location where she is killed. That's going to be very fragile. Then all of the blood deposition that is there surrounding her body is going to be very fragile. We're talking about footprints, which in a forested area where many times you have that kind of, loamy kind of soil, impression evidence is going to be key here as well. If she was killed in that location, we have to assume, and particularly if she's pregnant, she's going to be lying down. You can actually pick up, many times, Dave, I've actually seen this, where you can see where perpetrators kneeled beside bodies.
Wow.
You can't say definitively that this is the mark of a knee, but you can speculate on that, when you're trying to understand the movements of a potential perpetrator. So this area is just rife with fragile evidence in here. And I'll be very curious to see how they process this. And is there any way to tie back, I think, specific, say, impression evidence related to footprints, movement? How many people were in this party that took her out there? It's got to be more than just one person. We've got a sister that's already been charged. what kind of information did she know? Was she physically present there when this happened?
Based on the charges, you kind of can lead that way. And by the way, I did look up the temperatures. I wanted to know this because there was, on average, about 34 degrees in Wexford County where it took place in Michigan. But during the course of from between November 3rd and November 25th, when her body was found, they had the lowest temperature of the month happened on the 19th, and it was 13 degrees.
Wow. Okay.
The highest temperature of the month, and it was a major anomaly, was 56 degrees on November 15th. So in a 4-day window, you have a high of 56 and a low of 13. And, that's a big disparity of temperature. And yet you've got really cool temperatures. What about, we've got to deal with rodents, animals. You're out in the woods. What if the body was killed somewhere else and brought to this place and dumped?
Well, if she were to have been killed in another location, I began to think about conveyances at that point in time. Okay. Because we've had cases where individuals have been killed. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious here, have been killed in other locations and then dumped. But Dave, got to tell you, there's information that's kind of coming to light that kind of sounds like that ain't the case here. But going back to conveyances, if you think about motor vehicles, you mentioned at the top that we've got this kind of mysterious vehicle that she's placed into, or that she's maybe lured or compelled to get into by threats. We don't really know. And she's now moved out to that direction. I want to know, what did the sister know? When did she know it? It's kind of interesting too, this quote unquote, and I'm using this term very loosely, this father of the child. What did he know? But it sounds as though that I don't know if he just happens to have been kind of a peripheral character here. Did he actually have knowledge of what was going on? But isn't it interesting that they hooked him up on charges as well, almost, can we say simultaneously?
Yes. At the day that her body was found, he's charged with 2 counts of, well, at first we didn't tell us the charges. They put him in jail and her sister in jail the same day that she was found and didn't have charges on him at first. The charges came later. And that's when they hooked him up on 2 counts of delivering methamphetamine before the judge even set his bail at $1 million. Then Kimberly, the sister who's 21, was arraigned the same day on charges of tampering with evidence, lying to a police officer, and filing a false report. Now, it's unclear if those charges are related to the case of her sister who's dead and a baby that's missing. But, Joe, her bail is set at $750,000.
Holy smokes.
The information that we have about who Rebecca was last with, seen getting into a dark-colored car, comes from her biological mother, who, lo and behold, was the reason I called you today.
Let me hover over the sister one more time. Give me that number again. The bail for her?
$750,000. And the charges are tampering with evidence, lying to a police officer, and filing a false report.
Why
$750,000?
Why that huge number? The only thing I can think of is, I don't know, and again, I'm not a prosecutor or a judge, obviously. Don't want to be, trust me. The word that comes to mind is leverage. That is a huge number to hang on a 21-year-old. I don't know if she's got priors. I have no idea. But, those charges are, those things that she has been charged with are quite egregious. But $750,000 they're holding her on at this point in time. I don't know. I don't know if these people are people of means. I would say probably not, because at least in Rebecca's circle, she's in an intimate relationship with a guy who is essentially delivering meth, and they've hooked him up on 2 charges. I don't think that this guy has got, stashes of cash laying around necessarily. So what would be the purpose of putting these astronomical numbers on them other than the fact they're trying to get more information? And I can tell you this, the police, as it turns out, do have a virtual cornucopia of information that is going to reveal something that is so dark and so evil that I don't know that we can completely describe it without breaking down in tears. That brings us to today, Dave. Oh, my Lord. And I'll go ahead and let all of our friends know you and I are speaking about this on December the 3rd, 2025. As of today, we've got additional people that have been charged in this case, Brother Dave. Let me have it. Let me know what you got, man.
You know, there is one person who's actually proud of this broadcast today, is because we didn't lead with what we normally do. We actually carried it through, because this is the reason we're doing this story today. When Joe first brought this story up, it was because you were being asked to talk about this missing pregnant woman, then missing pregnant woman who's found in the woods, you know. Well, now we have discovered Cortney Bartholomew, the 40-year-old biological mother who did not raise Rebecca or her sister Kimberly, but is the mother. And they keep referring to her as the mother. She's now been charged, as has Bradley Bartholomew, Cortney's husband, who's 47, and they keep referring to Cortney and Bradley as the parents. They are not the parents of Rebecca, okay? Cortney is the biological mother. Today, both the biological mother and her husband were charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony murder, 1 count of torture, 1 count of conspiracy to commit torture, 1 count of assault on a pregnant individual causing miscarriage, stillbirth, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit assault on a pregnant individual causing miscarriage, stillbirth.
My Lord, that is a lot of information to digest.
They were also charged with 1 count of unlawful imprisonment.
Oh, God.
Yeah, needed to add that. Sorry.
Okay, let's just start with that charge, unlawful imprisonment, and you use the T word there, torture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so the police have enough information at this point in time to kind of paint a picture for us. The one thing that, look, I'm very interested in Rebecca, but Dave,
you mentioned it.
One of the big
Kimberly.
Things, I'm sorry.
You mentioned Kimberly and the $750,000 bond.
Yeah.
She was the source. She has to have been. Yeah.
She has to have been the source. She's the wellspring that all of this comes from. The one thing I'm really curious about is the baby, because to this point we don't have a child, at least that is information that's coming out where we say we have a body of an infant. They're not saying that. Now, they are saying that this crime was perpetrated against a pregnant woman and that she was assaulted in order to, was it induce? Was it, what's the phraseology here? Induce a miscarriage or a birth, or what's going on with this?
It was, the charge was committing assault on a pregnant individual causing miscarriage or stillbirth. And it's the conspiracy to commit assault, and the pregnancy being ended through miscarriage or stillbirth is the result of that, the assault. But let me share something with you that was shared in court today. The prosecutor for Wexford County, her name is Joanna Carey. She told the judge in laying out the case and asking for a huge bail. They bring out a lot of information at these, not all of it, but enough.
Right. Yeah.
This is what the prosecutor told the judge today. Mr. Bartholomew brought Rebecca to their home He and Cortney forced her, Rebecca, into another vehicle and took her into the woods where they stabbed her, forced her to lie on the ground while they cut her baby out and ultimately caused her death and the death of the baby.
Oh,
then
my Lord.
They then left Rebecca in the woods. Joe, she was alive while they were cutting the baby out. They kept her alive. That's the torture. They were torturing her to try to steal the baby, keeping her alive and to take the baby. They were trying to get a live baby out of her.
Okay. So with that said, and thinking about what the prosecutor said in the statement that was made in court, we can kind of put some things together here, because the first statement that she makes is that she was stabbed. And that's, to me, that sounds like menacing. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because the stabbing necessarily, the way they kind of ordered their comments here, mm-hmm. it's like she stabbed, but it's a non-lethal stab. Right. Okay. It's a non-lethal sharp force injury. They're trying to compel her to get into the woods. Can you imagine the terror here? I can't on any level. So she's stabbed. She's compelled to go into this wooded area. And oh, my Lord, you're talking about taking, I don't know, the same instrument, perhaps. I doubt, knowing what I know about having worked in the morgue for years and years, I can guarantee you, I don't think they had a number 220. They had a number 22 scalpel blade with retractors, wow, and forceps and everything else that you need in order to facilitate a cesarean birth in a clinical environment. Oh my God, Dave, this is so evil. Hey, Joe, there's another line in here that I got to give you. You ready? The prosecutor called it a case of premeditated torture and murder, alleging that the Bartholomews created a plan and conducted research. Okay. This harkens back to a case that I've talked about before, cases with the Piketon Massacre. Been involved in that docuseries and the podcast. We've covered, Dave and I have covered it. And that was where one family killed another family on one night. They had 4 different crime scenes, 8 people dead. I've often wondered, how do you get to this point just from, dare I say, a morality standpoint, where you're sitting around the kitchen table? Because, Dave, you're talking about planning now, and research to boot. You're sitting around the kitchen table and you're saying, just like they did in Piketon, this is what we're going to do. And that this is what you come up with. You're going to go out taking a pregnant woman who is full term, by the way, take her out there and torture her in order to extract a full-term baby so that they can do what with the baby? I have no idea, but you're leaving the mother there, again, being tossed out. I think that one of the things that's going to be really interesting to follow here from a forensic standpoint is not just the level of decomposition and the PMI and all that stuff that we talk about, but also I want to understand the status of these injuries, okay? Because what was mentioned here is that she has been stabbed. So going on what the prosecutor is saying, that stab wound obviously is going to have hemorrhage in the wound tract. Okay. And even in the state of decomposition, we can pick up on that. Okay. Right. However, as we begin to move down her body and we think about this insult that has taken place in her abdominal region, oh my Lord, Dave, is there hemorrhage in that area? Because if there is hemorrhage in that area where this incision has been made with whatever kind of rudimentary tool that they have brought with them, if there is hemorrhage in there, if they did not wait for her to bleed out and die and do this in a postmortem state, Dave, this reaches depths. I was going to say heights. This reaches depths that I don't know that you and I have really probed before here on body bags, because there will be distinct injuries if they're doing some kind of rudimentary cesarean incision on her, where in that wound tract, as that blade is drug across the surface of her skin, where you will see focal areas of hemorrhage. She will have to be restrained. That's why this would have taken more than one person. If she's found in, say, and let me go back just a second. If she is found lying in a supine position, which means face up, my thought is someone would have to, at minimum, hold her shoulders down on the ground while the other person is wielding this instrument to drag across her abdomen. And it's not just making a superficial cut, Dave. We're talking about a cut that's going to go through the dermis. It's going to go through the subcu fat, through the fascia that's in there, to get down actually to the womb, to open the womb, to get through the placenta, and then to extricate the baby at that moment in time. I only pray that she passed out as a result of blood loss, that she did not have an awareness that this was occurring. Because when this thing is presented in court, and if we have an indication now, because it sounds like the prosecutor have a lot of data here, this is going to be a tale so dark that I can't imagine that this would even be defensible. You cannot say, I don't think that any right-thinking person can actually say, well, this was a case of temporary insanity. No. That's not going to work in this case. You've got two people that purposed in their life to rob this woman of her life, and also, as it turns out, the life of her unborn child, who at this point, she's 38 weeks, Dave, this baby is viable. But they're saying now, according to the charges, that this was apparently a stillbirth. Going back to the sister and this point of leverage, what did she know and when did she know it? Is this something, was she present for this? Did she stand by and watch as her biological sibling is tortured and literally, I don't know how to say it, disemboweled there in that forest? Did she watch that, or was this conveyed to her? Did these two alleged perpetrators, did they come back home and say, well, yeah, the baby didn't make it? Still, I have to say, where is the baby? Because they're talking about stillbirth, that tells me that the baby is deceased. So where is the baby? Was the baby at the scene? It sounds like the baby wasn't, because they've said over and over again that you've got this young woman, 22 years old, Rebecca, who's found with her abdomen literally open and left in this forested area. Where did they take the baby, and where did they deposit the baby? What's the status of the baby? Did the baby, here's another question, Dave. Did that baby ever draw breath? Okay. Did that baby ever draw breath? Was that baby living outside of the womb at that point in time? How long did this event, I was going to say procedure, this is not a procedure. How long did this horror last? When mom died, finally, did the baby die in utero? Did they not get to the baby in time? We've covered other cases like this. I recall a case out of the Dakotas. There was another case in Chicago. There was a case, where was it? In Oklahoma or Kansas. Or in Kansas, where this has happened.
Lisa Montgomery was just put to death over that one a couple of years ago, where she lured the woman over about a dog, a pregnant woman, and ended up choking her out and taking the baby, and the woman's died, and she was convicted, sentenced to death. And it took years, but they finally did put her to death. But Joe, I think the charging here actually tells us what happened to the baby. Both Cortney Bartholomew and her husband Bradley were charged with first-degree murder, 1 count of felony murder, 1 count of torture, 1 count of conspiracy to commit torture, 1 count of assault on a pregnant individual causing miscarriage, stillbirth. Miscarriage and stillbirth means the baby was not breathing, did not breathe, right? I would think so. If they're talking about, this is not a miscarriage. A miscarriage implies that that's kind of a natural event.
You could say that she miscarried.
That's the charge. No, the charge is one count assault on a pregnant individual causing a miscarriage. Yeah,
right. And there are cases out there.
Out of her.
There are cases out there where you have pregnant women that have been kicked in the abdomen, and that results in a miscarriage. Okay. Mm-hmm. But to say stillborn, if you take that component of the law and the charge there, that gives you an indication that the baby was deceased at that point in time. I think here's another bit to this, because if I remember correctly, Scott Peterson, right?
Okay. Yeah, they charged
with him. They doubled up on him. Mm-hmm. Is there another charge to follow with this? Are they going to say that this is in fact a double homicide? In my worldview, yeah, this is a double homicide here. So you're not just looking at Rebecca's murder. Okay. You're also looking at a homicide, a murder of this baby as well. I think that there's probably, we had to hop on and do this. Mm-hmm. I think that there is going to be a lot more to come information wise. I'm going to be very interested in a couple of things here. I want to know, first off, did they ply her with anything? Did she have any drugs on board at all? And I'm not saying she was using drugs. I'm saying, did they give her anything? Did they harm her in any way? I want to know that relative to her toxicology. And I want to know exactly what happened to this baby, where the baby wound up, and what was the motivation behind this. I don't know. More shall be revealed. Until then, we'll keep you abreast as further data comes out. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.